Om Jnana-timirandasya Gyananjana-shalakaya Chakshur-nitanjena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Dandavat pranams of the assembled Vaishnavas, and we are going through Srimad Bhagavad Gita. We're at the beginning of chapter 4, and last week we went through some really exciting verses discussing the dynamic nature of truth and revelation, the need for constant, fresh revelation and connection. And so we've come to verse number 10, and I'm going to play. We have this recording of our Gurudev, Srila Govinda Maharaj, and so I'm going to play those. Well, we can listen to these first 9 verses again and then pick up with verse 10. So here we go.
Hari Om Tat Sat. Chaturthodhyaya Jnana Yoga Sri Bhagavan Uvacha Imang Vivasate Yogam Praktavānaham Abhayam Vivasyan Manave Praha Manurikha Kavi Bravit Evang Parampara Praptam Imang Raja Sayo Vidu Sakale Nehamahata Yogo Nasta Parantapa Saivayang Maya Tedya Yoga Prakta Svana Puratana Bhakto Sime Sakha Cheti Rahasyang Chetaduttamam Arjuna Vacha Aparang Bhavatu Janama Parang Janama Vivasata Kathavi Tad Vijaniyang Tamadu Praktavaniti Sri Bhagavan Vacha Bahuni me batitani janamani tapacharjuna tanahang veda sarvani nattang vetha parantapa ayobi sannabhayatma bhutanami sarupishan prakriting swamad adhisthaya sambhavami atma mayaya yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata abhuthano dharmasya Tadatmanam sriyamaham paritrānāya sadhūnāṃ vināṣāya chaduskritāṃ dharma samsthāpanārthāya sambhavāmi yuge yuge janma karma chame dibbam evang jo vetti tattata tatta deham punarjanama naiti māmeti sorjuna vītarāga bhayo krodha मनमया मामुपाश्रिताः बहवो ज्ञानतपसा पूजा मद्भावमागताः ये यथा मम प्रपद्यन्ते तांस्तथैव भजाम्यहम् मम वर्त्मानुवर्तन्ते मनुष्या पार्थ सर्वथा काङ्क्षन्तः कर्मणां सिद्धिं यजन्त इह देवताः क्षिप्रं हि मानुषे लोके सिद्धिर्भवति कर्मजा चातुर्वर्ण्यं मया सृष्टं गुणकर्म विभागतः तस्य कर्तारमपि मां विद्धकर्तारमभयं न मां कर्माणि लिप्यन्ति न मे कर्म फले स्पृहा इति मां जोऽभिजानाति कर्मभिर्न सबध्यते एवं ज्ञाता कृतं कर्म पूर्वैरपि मुमुक्षुभिः कुरु कर्मैव तस्मात् त्वं पूर्वैः पूर्वतरं कृतम्.
All right. So we've just heard up to verse 15. We can pick up from verse 10 where we left off. So I think we can chant these. It's nice to chant the Sanskrit together too. So maybe we can do that first and then go through the translations one by one. So Vitaraga Bhaya Krodha Manmaya Mamupashitaha Bahavo Jnana Tapasa Putta Madbhavam Agataha. Free from attachment, fear, and anger, many persons have taken shelter in me, absorbing their hearts in my services, hearing, chanting, and remembering Purified by knowledge and the fire of ordeal and my service, they attained divine love for me. This is a really wonderful verse. You know, Bhagavad Gita, it's a scripture that's, it's designed to speak to everyone, right? So there's many different levels of knowledge in Bhagavad Gita. Um, and there are different yogas, of course, that are being discussed, and so some are more directly aligned with the ideals of pure devotion, and others less so. And this is a verse which is, very much aligned with the highest ideal of divine love. And it's more or less summarizing our practice, right? Many persons have taken shelter in me, absorbing their hearts in my services, purified by knowledge and the fire of ordeal. The fire of ordeal, I think we all know about that. The fire of ordeal in my service, they attained divine love for me. No. Actually, the nature of this world is that we have to go through ordeals. Like it's just inevitable, right? However we're living our life, whatever situation we have, whether you're living very comfortably with, material success, or whether you're living uncomfortably with little material success, everyone has to go through challenges and ordeals, right? It is simply the nature of this world. And everything's relative, right? So someone who has a relatively, comfortable and opulent lifestyle, the distress that they experience in their daily lives may be the same as someone who's living with far less success and resources, right? So it's just the nature of things that we have to live with challenges, and it's a way of living a dynamic life. Um, sorry, we've got people in the waiting room here. Um, so like what I'm meditating on now, like looking at this verse, is like, we may as well dovetail that life of ordeal in connection with the Lord's service. Like, let's make our ordeals meaningful and progressive, right? It's inevitable that we have to experience ordeals, but why not use that as a tool of progress, right? We have to face obstacles inevitably. Let's 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 direct that in our service to the Lord, right? And that will be something progressive and something beautiful and wholesome. So this is, in the material world, the ordeals and challenges we go through, they keep us in the fishbowl of this material existence, right? Just going round and round, up and down, according to our karma, sometimes experiencing positive, sometimes experiencing negative, sometimes experiencing happiness, sometimes experiencing suffering. But overall, we're remaining within this closed system, right? This fishbowl of material existence. But when we face ordeals in the service of the Lord, then those ordeals that we face, they become progressive. They become progressive. And they become a tool of progress, right? And so it is when we have the privilege actually of being able to face challenges in our devotional life, in our practicing life, in our service life, it's actually a wonderful privilege, And we have to see that the Lord's grace is behind that, coming to help us. There's even the firefighters, and they have in America, I've heard they have this beautiful expression By fire shall hearts be proven, right? There's some expression like that, like gold is purified by fire, so by fire shall hearts be proven. There's some expression like that. Welcome, Gangalila. Um, and so it is the same here. In our approach towards the Lord, we have so many layers of material conditioning that need to be cleared, and challenges, obstacles, ordeals are necessary in order for us to be able to move closer to the Lord. Sacrifice, we see, and even again, even in a worldly sense, we see that sacrifice is something that is progressive, right? There's so many statements around this in various discussions in the world, that, if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger, right? So on and so forth. There's a universal recognition of the fact that sacrifice, difficulty activates us, energizes us, awakens us, and pushes us forward into a more progressive life. And recently it kind of hit me, like, why that is. Why is it that sacrifice is progressive, right? Why is it that we discover new depths within ourselves when we go through sacrifice? Why is it that we grow through sacrifice? And recently it hit me. The reason for that is because the mode of sacrifice brings us closer to the nature of the soul, right? Because the nature of the soul is to give. The nature of the soul is to give and to sacrifice. That is our constitutional nature. And so when we engage in acts of sacrifice, and it may be in connection even with a worldly goal, but even so, we're in that mode of giving and sacrificing. So it helps us to access the inner resources of the soul. And so it is encouraged, anyhow, in one way or another, just get into that practice of giving, of sacrificing, and you will grow from that. Srila Sridhar Maharaj quotes one expression, if you must give ashes, but practice the hand to give, right? There's some expression like that. Maybe it's a Christian expression, I'm not sure. Maybe someone here knows it. Anyhow or other, practice the hand to give, right? Even if you're just giving ashes, but give something, just get into that practice of giving, of sacrificing. It is so progressive for the soul. So even in a worldly sense, we see the benefits that can come from expressions of sacrifice and service. So what to speak of the benefit that comes from aligning that spirit of sacrifice in connection with the Lord, then we're connecting with the eternal realm, right? Sat, right? Eternity and truth. We are approaching that realm, and we are awakening our own inner nature, and as well as our connection with our sweet Lord, Sri Krishna. So here in this verse in Gita, Krishna is describing, right, through this process, my devotees, they attain divine love from me. So very wonderful verse. And we can also, it's also a nice meditation, when we wake up in the morning, right? That, let me happily face whatever comes to me on this day, with the vision that it's coming to help me and to adjust me. Let me invite whatever is coming to me today to help me on my path towards eternity, towards truth, towards devotion. Let me embrace that. It's a wonderful meditation. And going on to verse 11, Ye yata mam prapadyante tam stataiva bhajamyaham mama vart manuvartante manusha parta sarvashaha. Howsoever people surrender to me, I accordingly reward them. Being the ultimate goal of all paths, I am the objective to be attained by all. O Partha, all men follow my various paths. Now, this is a very interesting, significant verse. It's quite a well-known verse that's quoted often by our gurus. And there's many layers to this verse, and Krishna is saying here that, there are many different planes of truth, many different planes of reality, and we don't deny the the nature. We don't deny the factual. That's what I want to say. We don't deny the factual existence of different planes of reality, right? Whatever one is experiencing, it's real on one level, right? There are some in some schools of thought, particularly who we call the Mayavadis, they say that everything's illusion, right? Everything other than merging into the universal consciousness and oneness, anything other than that Brahman plane is just illusion. So what you're experiencing is illusion. What I'm experiencing is illusion. It's all just illusion. It's not real. Even the conception of you and I as individuals is not real. That's their belief, right? But the Vaishnava conception is different, saying that no, everything has a factual reality. What you're experiencing is very real. The only reason why it may be considered an illusion is that it is based on temporary truth, right? But it does have its existence within the relative plane, right? And so what Krishna is saying here is that however you are approaching reality, that will be reciprocated with you, right? If you, whatever belief system you have and that you're approaching the environment with, that will be confirmed, right, by your experience with the environment. Like we could mention here this term confirmation bias, right? I'm sure many of you have heard that. It's discussed like in psychology and other fields, that this conception that, whatever your belief system is, because you're viewing the environment with that lens, with that filter, then whatever you experience is going to confirm that, right? And then you'll suddenly be interpreting everything according to that lens. But it's actually, and although it's real on one level, it's a limited way and a prejudiced way of viewing and experiencing the environment. But it has one layer of truth, We can also think, like sometimes I think of it in this way, that like any society, there's different strata, right? There's the lower rungs of society, persons who are struggling more. You could take at an extreme level, someone living in the slums, could be dealing drugs, dealing with a very intense environment of exploitation, and all kinds of, horrible things which you don't even want to think about, maybe surrounding them. Like that's one actual level of society that exists all over the world, in every country of the world. But and that's their reality, right? Then in that same society, you can find someone in the upper rungs who's living a very comfortable life, in relative safety, has everything that they need and want, don't have to worry too much. That's their reality, right? So why is it that one is experiencing one reality, another is experiencing a completely different reality within the same, could even be within, a few meters of one another, and I've seen that in some places, like back to back neighborhoods that are, very different from one, back to back streets, that are very different from one another. That's because we're all approaching the environment with a different lens. We're also carrying different types of baggage, karmic baggage from our previous lives, right? But if we change our lens on the environment and we act according to that, our experience will change. And that may be something positive or negative, depending what the change in the lens is, right? Srila Sridhar Maharaj has this expression I've been thinking about lately, where he refers to Krishna as a hypnotist, right? Because ultimately Krishna is at the back of all of our experiences. So he describes Krishna as a mystic hypnotist, right? Because, you're compelled to see what a hypnotist wants you to see, right? And so this verse is describing that howsoever persons are approaching me, howsoever persons are approaching the environment, their reality, that will be reciprocated with them, right? And there's also an element of free choice, right? Ultimately, Krishna gives everyone what they want, right? And you can choose what reality, just like if you're changing the channels on a television, you can choose which reality you're going to experience, of course, within some realm of reason, there we have a degree of choice. What genre is your life story going to be? What's the narrative of your life? We all have some degree of free will to choose, what that is going to be. you know and there's other implications of this verse which are very interesting, right? Which is like, if you're really seeking absolute truth, that will be revealed to you. But on the other hand, if you're not seeking absolute truth, if you're seeking a lower level of truth, or you could say, in a sense, if you want to deceive yourself, I will help you with that too. That will be reciprocated with you, because Krishna is not forcing anything upon us. He's laying out the options on the table. You can pick, and whatever you pick, that's a possibility, right? Of course, the catch is that if what you pick to be your experience of reality is not in alignment with absolute truth, with eternal truth, then there is an expiry date on the experience of that particular reality. It's going to end at a certain point because it's not in harmony with the whole, right? It's not moving with the stream, it's going against the stream. It's moving in friction with the fundamental basis of reality. It's not a part of the organic whole, right? In an organic whole is comprised of different parts or organs, right? As in our body. Our body is an organic system, which means it's a system that's comprised of different parts, different organs that are all working together for the common good, right? So just like in an ecosystem, if you take a forest or a jungle ecosystem, every entity in that system has its particular place and contribution to make within the system of a whole, right? But if you disturb that ecosystem, if you plant things that aren't meant to be planted there, you uproot things that aren't meant to be uprooted, and so on, then the ecosystem, goes wonky, right? And there's disturbance, and there's a lifespan on whatever it is that you're trying to achieve, because it's not sustainable, right? That's another factor here. So what truth is sustainable, right? Nowadays people talk about sustainability. Like, what's the ultimate sustainability? To live in harmony with the whole, in awareness of our true nature, our eternal nature as loving servitors, right, within the organic whole. That's sustainable, like within eternity, right? So that is the catch, right? You can pick your reality, but if you pick a reality that's not aligned with absolute truth, it's not sustainable for the long term. It's sustainable maybe within your lifetime, one short lifetime, which is like one little blip within the infinite, within eternity. So it'll be sustainable for that lifetime, but it won't go beyond that, right? It won't go beyond that. So this is ultimately what is the advice of the revealed truth, right? Of sadhu and shastra, guru and scripture. Live within eternity. Don't limit yourself, don't tie yourself down to this one small little span of time that you're experiencing now. Don't tie yourself down, but link hands with the infinite, join the universal dance, join the universal flow. And what is it that you're actually searching for? You're searching for joy, for fulfillment, for love, for connection. But if you try to seek that within this limited sphere, you're going to experience a limited degree of that. So cast yourself within the infinite, cast yourself within eternity, and wait and see, what will come, what degree of love and beauty, fulfillment will come to you. That is inconceivable, right? How much is there? Because when we connect with the infinite, we receive infinite. So we cannot even begin to comprehend how much is waiting for us. And that is actually our birthright, right? The scriptures are declaring, Shrinvantu Vishve Amritasya Putraha, right? You are all children of nectar. You are all children of the ocean of nectar. Don't settle for anything less than that, So awake, arise, seek out your fortune in that higher land. Don't be a beggar digging through the garbage. There's an ocean of nectar waiting for you. Why are you looking for little scraps in the garbage can? But awake, arise, and seek out your real fortune. This is the advice of the Veda. And this is interesting too, this line, all men follow my various paths. Krishna is saying nothing's outside of me. Even if persons turn away from me, that's also part of my system. Like I'm also giving space for that, right? In some religious systems of thought, there's this conception of like like an evil anti evil opponent of God, right? Who's a rival to God, who threatens God. But we consider this to be quite a silly idea. If there's really a God, he will be supreme, he will be independent, everything will be within his realm of control. So the idea of some evil power like Satan threatening him, that's not logical at all. So Krishna is saying, everything exists within my system in a sense, right? There's nothing outside of me. So even if persons turn away from me, they're still within my realm, right? Krishna's even giving facility for people to not believe him. Like he's magnanimous to that extent. If you don't want to believe in me, I'll also confirm that experience of the worlds. Like if you don't believe in God, I'll also help you. If you don't want to believe in God, I'll also help you to not believe in God. So you want to have that experience, you're free to have that experience. Krishna even appears as Buddha, right? Buddhism is ultimately an atheistic conception, right? Which ends in nirvana, total self-extinction, annihilation of the self, right? It's really, I find quite an unbelievable conception, total self-extinction, total self-annihilation. Right? But Krishna is appearing as Buddha himself and propagating that message. And there are many who are attracted to that. And that is also that may also be a progressive path, right? It's bringing one above a conception of base materialism. Once our Gurudev, he was trying to list all the world religions, and then someone, or perhaps he said Buddhism, and then someone else in the room said, oh, but Buddhism doesn't really count as a religion because they don't believe in God. But our Gurudev, he said no. He said that they are promoting something progressive. It's at least taking the seeker above a conception of just base material enjoyment, right? So there's some progressiveness there. We can appreciate that, right? So anyhow, just to make the point that the Lord is really supporting everyone in whatever it is they want to believe, and validating their belief system, giving them the experience that they want ultimately, right? And the idea is that ultimately they'll become tired and all of that, and really sincerely, wholeheartedly seek out what is the substantial reality. What is my actual position within the environment? What is actually the nature of absolute truth and the absolute entity? And how can I attain that, right? And in a nutshell, that's Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojan. Understanding what is the true nature of things, what is the true nature of myself, what is the real goal, what is the ultimate goal and attainment for the soul, and how can I do that? What's the path by which I can make that movement, right, towards the goal? So this is the idea that the souls are given freedom to explore as they want to explore. And the Lord is like a patient parent in a sense, like have your fun, do whatever it is you want to do, learn your lessons as you need to learn them, and I'll be waiting for you whenever you're ready. We can get on with the real thing, with the real stuff. So the Lord's magnanimity, his affection, his love, his patience, you could say, is unlimited. So very interesting meditation, this verse 11. Okay, so we'll go on to verse 12. Kankshata karmanam siddhim yajanta devataha kshipram hi manushya siddhir bhavati karmaja. Persons who desire the fruit of their actions worship the gods, since in the human plane, actions swiftly bear fruit. So the devas, right, and the devis, the devatas, they are the gods, or who sometimes we refer to as the demigods, right? They are souls who are appointed to take care of the whole material plane. And they all have their different departments, you could say, right? Lakshmi Devi is the goddess of wealth. Lord Brahma is the creator and an overall head of the devas. Lord Indra is in charge of the rain and the weather and so on. Saraswati Devi is the goddess of knowledge, right? There are all of these devas who are responsible for different areas. And in the traditional Vedic system, persons are worshiping these gods, praying for support in these various departments. Yeah. Okay, we can go on to the next verse. But of course, in the vision of Krishna consciousness, Vaishnavism, we see that Krishna is the real source of all of this power, right? And actually, ultimately, these gods, although they have some power within this world, they're actually also mortal beings. They live for unimaginable periods of time, but they're also living within the relativity of this limited world of time and space. And they ultimately have to face mortality as well. And so our vision is, well, Krishna, he is actually the real source of their power, and let us go straight to the source, right? Approach Krishna for everything. Now this verse 13, Chaturvanyam maya shishtam gunakarma vibhagashaha tasya kartanam api mam vidya kartanam avyayam. The four social divisions classified according to the material modes of nature and corresponding activities are made manifest by me. Although I am the doer of this, know me to be the non-doer and unchangeable. So here Krishna is speaking specifically about this varṇāśrama system, right? This is the name for the ancient Vedic social system of India. And Krishna is saying here, like, I actually made that system. Maya Shishtam. I am the creator of the system. And he's explaining the reasoning behind it, right? Guna karma vibhaga shaha. That this is the original idea of this social system, that persons will be placed in society according to their nature, their qualities, and their activities, right? And, I mean, unfortunately, it is a system which became, quite hierarchical, and, is often used as a tool of exploitation, right? And there's a lot of arrogance, behind those who are in what are considered higher castes, and there's prejudice against those who are in lower castes. And another deviation in this system is that, um, it became focused on bloodline, right, and birth. So, like the way the varṇāśrama system has played out in society, what we see today is that persons are classified in different um, places in the system according to their birth, right? So, in other words, if your father was a Brahmin, then you're considered a Brahmin, right? Or if your father was a Shudra, you're considered a Shudra. But actually, Krishna is explaining here the real idea is that you're classified according to your nature. So if you have the nature of a Brahmin, then you'll be considered a Brahmin and you'll be given the roles of a Brahmin. If you have the nature of a Kshatriya, then you'll be considered a Kshatriya, given the duties of a Kshatriya, right? And in case anyone here is not familiar with this system, I know Ati Sunji is our new god sister. So in case you're not familiar with this, I can just briefly summarize it. There are these four classes known as Varnas, right? And these are Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. And the Brahmins, they're sometimes referred to as the heads of the society. They are the scholars, the spiritually inclined, focused on study of the scripture. The Brahmins will traditionally live very simple lives, right? We were discussing this in SoCal recently, right? Simple living and high thinking. This is the life of a Brahmin, taking minimum resources from the environment and putting maximum focus on one's spiritual cultivation. This is the idea with the Brahmins. And they're all, as the heads, right, they're guides. And they're the guides of society. And interestingly, the Kshatriyas, right? So the Kshatriyas, they're the warriors, the protectors, but they're also the kings. So the Kshatriyas are the ones who are ostensibly in power, like they hold the power. But interestingly and quite beautifully, those Kshatriyas, they will defer to the Brahmins. And although the Kshatriyas are living these powerful, opulent lifestyles, they submit to the guidance of the Brahmins. And so the Brahmins are living these like poor, simple lifestyles, but they're like, in a sense, the secret power behind things. This was the traditional Vedic system. It's very beautiful. So the Kshatriyas would give honor and take advice, and they would support also the Brahmins, so they didn't have to worry about their livelihood. Then there are the Vaishyas. The Vaishyas were traditionally merchants or, farmers working in agriculture, dairy farming, and so on. That is the Vaishyas, business, merchants. Then the Shudras, they are the laborer class, and they would serve the higher castes. And so the idea is that according to one's consciousness, one's nature, one will be placed in the role of one of these four castes. And then that's Varna, and then there's ashram, and the ashram refers to, you could say, different stages of life, depending how it plays out. Ashram literally means shelter. So you could say it's like kind of like a structure that shelters you in your progressive life, right? In your life of progress. Because the whole idea of this system is that it's a way for a society to move forward, to make progress collectively, right? Because there's the central objective of living aligned with God and with absolute truth. And the idea of these different roles is that we all have a way to express our human nature in a wholesome and progressive and productive way, right? So, for example, if someone has the nature of a fighter, then, rather than letting them just become troublemakers and create conflict and destroy things, let's put them in the role of a protector, of a warrior, protecting society so that they can, in a healthy way, express this human nature, right? And so in that way, they can like channel their different tendencies in a healthy way and also simultaneously put some focus on what is the real purpose of human existence, which is, God consciousness. This is the idea. So then the other four, which I was about to mention, that is, brahmacharya, grihasta, vanaprastha, sannyas. The brahmacharya is referring to persons, and that would generally be at a young age, living a celibate life as a student, studying under one's teacher, one's guru, living this very focused life of, spiritual study and service to one's teacher, brahmachari. Then grihasta stage, entering into family life, which is an opportunity to channel one's material desires for various types of fulfillment in the world. Then the next stage would be vanaprastha, which this refers to a stage when a couple, husband, wife, they would enter a life of more spiritual focus, right? The children are grown up, and now they would enter into this new stage of remaining together, but practicing celibacy and together studying and supporting one another on the path. And then ultimately sannyas, and this is something that the men would mostly do. That means becoming completely renounced, detaching from family completely, and focusing on serious spiritual cultivation and also traveling and sharing that message as far as possible. So this is the varṇāśrama system which Krishna is referring to here. So going on to verse, and then you can say, well, is this relevant to us at all now? And we can say, it is a model that is helpful in some ways, and it is applicable. It is something we can refer to and apply in different ways in our life, right? In the sense that we can see what our material nature is, and we don't have to completely suppress or reject our material nature, but find a way to channel it in a healthy way, while at the same time trying to keep our highest purpose on the ultimate goal, right? And so there's also different expressions of this varnashrama system, right? There's Daiva varnashrama, which means God-centered varnashrama, and that's what we refer to, try to follow to some degree, right? Like in my own case, our Gurudev gave me the saffron cloth, and so I'm living a life as a monk, right? So that's like a structure that I have in my life, which helps me to stay focused on what is my path, right? Others, may feel more inclined toward family life, but that can also be seen as a structure that ultimately helps one on the path, right? So the family is supporting one another, helping one another on their their journey, right? On their spiritual journey. So the idea is that we choose a framework that supports us according to our nature. Then that we can also apply that to, those who are who are working, right? To find a field of work that suits their material nature and is can be used as a tool of expression, right? So we're not repressing our material nature. For example, if someone has attraction to wealth, that's not, that doesn't need to be denied to them, but you can use your capabilities, your nature, in that field, in the line of work that suits you. But then you can also try to see, well, this wealth, this is ultimately, this is Krishna's wealth, and how can I use this wealth in the service of Krishna? Now, of course, I will take some degree of that for my own sustenance, but let me also use that in the cause of what it's actually for originally, right? Because all wealth belongs to the Lord. The wealth is Lakshmi Devi. Lakshmi Devi is the consort of Lord Vishnu, and she likes to serve Vishnu, right? So so money is a manifestation of Lakshmi Devi. So I will honor it in that way and use it as far as possible in the service of a higher purpose, right? So this varṇāśrama system, it does have some presence in our practicing lives. It can be applied. And this was the vision of Saraswati Thakur. Of course, ultimately, the varṇāśrama system is something external, because ultimately we're all just souls, right? And the soul is not any of these things. The soul is not a Brahman, a Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra. The soul is not a sannyasi or a brahmachari, any of these things. The soul is just a servant of Krishna. Jiver Krishner Supahoy, Krishner Nitya Das, right? So, that's the highest vision. That's the ultimate vision, that we're all spirit souls and we're all just servants of Krishna. And we don't need to have these labels that I'm this or I'm that, right? And Mahaprabhu himself, he has one verse, right? Naham vipro nacha narapatir napi vaishyo na shudro, right? Nacha varni nacha grihapatir no vanastogatir va kintu prodyan Nikila Padamananda Purnamritam Der Gopi Bartu Padakamalayur Adadas Adas Anudas. In this verse, Mahaprabhu, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he's in a sense like denouncing the Varnashrama system. Like saying, I'm not a Brahmin, I'm not a Kshatriya, I'm not a Vaishya, I'm not a Shudra, I'm not a brahmacharya, sannyasi, grihasta, vanaprastha. I'm not any of these things, he says. I'm just a servant of Krishna, right? I'm a servant of that sweet, loving Lord of the gopis. That is who I am. That's the only identity that I have, right? So that's intrinsically our identity. We're all jivatma, we're all spirit souls, and we're all jiver. We are all Krishna Das, servants of Krishna. So it's also important to keep that higher vision, right? So then why do we even consider this varnāśrama system, and why is it that Krishna personally made the arrangement for it? Because the reality is we are conditioned souls, right? We're not living in connection with our intrinsic self. We need the help, we need the support of different structures and systems in society that help keep us on track, right? And those systems help us live lives as, just decent human beings. But ultimately, they can also, if they're applied properly, they can also help us in our advancement towards the ultimate goal. So that's the idea. And that's why Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur implemented the varnāśrama system. And that was criticized by many other Gaudiya Vaishnavas who could not understand his inner purpose, because their critique was what we just said, right? We don't need any type of cloth. We don't need any type of label. We're all just servants of God. We're lovers of God. Why are you making it so external, right? And their point is valid, but Saraswati Thakur's consideration is, as we also said, that we are living in this material plane of consciousness. We are we are living disconnected from our true identity, and we need some type of structure to support us on the path within our relative position. That was Saraswati Thakur's vision. And this is what is called Daiva varṇāśrama, God-centered social system, God-centered varṇāśrama system. Right. So then what's the other expression of varṇāśrama? That is the asura varṇāśrama, demonic varṇāśrama. And that's when this varṇāśrama system is really just centered on one's own selfish goals, um, uh, becomes a tool of exploitation, and is not, is very much focused on the bodily aspect of things, focused on material gain and so on. And there's no connection with the real spiritual purpose that is at the heart of it, right? And when you meet people like that, like I've met persons who have like business cards calling them saying, I'm a Brahmin, right? I'm this type of Brahmin and this is my line of work, please sign up, for me, be my client and all this kind of stuff. And it's just like a label that they use to promote themselves as superior, right? Or even used as a tool for business, right? That's what I would call asura varnashrama, not daiva varnashrama, not God-centered varnashrama. So, okay, now we're just coming to the end of our time, but we can finish these couple verses. So verse 14. Na namam karmani limpanti, name karma phale spriha, iti mam yo vijanati, karmarbirna sabhadyate. I am never implicated by action, nor do I desire the fruits of action. One who knows me thus, as the Supreme Lord, transcendental to worldly action, is never bound by action. Verse 15. Evam gyatva kritam karma porverapi mumukshubhi guru karmaiva tasmatvam porvatanam kritam. Knowing this basic principle, seekers of liberation in previous times renounced all fruit of work and performed their duties as a selfless offering to me. Likewise, you should adopt this yoga of selfless action, as did the great saintly persons of yore. So Krishna is explaining the principles of this ideal varnashrama system, right? That you have your like allotted duty within society according to your nature, and you're performing those duties, but you're performing those duties in a spirit of selfless sacrifice, right? You're performing these duties in a spirit of selflessness and giving, right? You're not performing these duties in a mood of calculation that I'm going to get this and I'm going to get that in return. But this is simply my duty and I'm doing it, whatever it is, whether you're a bus driver or a politician or a president or a school teacher or a mom or a dad, whatever it is, you have your designated duties and you're carrying them out in a spirit of selflessness and pure duty, not entangling your mind in calculation of what's in it for you, right? But just happily making your offering in a spirit of happy duty. And doing this has this purifying effect on the consciousness. It starts to clear the layers within the consciousness, the filters of the mind, they begin to clear. So this is, in a word, karma yoga. Krishna is reviewing principles of karma yoga. The varnashrama system is based on principles of karma yoga. They're like synonymous in a sense. Well, I think we can stop there for today. I'm going to close our screen share. And maybe we can open up the board. I don't know if anyone wants to bring up any points. Oh, we lost Ganga Leela. She was here earlier. Yeah, it's so nice to go through Bhagavad Gita, and it's always very interesting, like to go through some of these, what we might call ancient systems or ancient teachings, and to see how they're so relevant and applicable for today. And so I think some of the things we discussed today are very much in line with that. Okay, well, everyone's very quiet today. Oh, thank you, Kirtida. Thank you for being with us. Nazar. Nazar, anything you want to bring up? Okay. Nati Sundri. Do you have anything you want to share, Ati Sundri? Whether it's related to what we just discussed or anything else at all? Okay. All right. So we'll stop there for today then. Thank you all for your good company. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyeva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Okay. Dandavat pranams. Wishing you all a good day, good evening ahead. See you next time. Jai Shri Gurudev.